Salesforce Space Station.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Salesforce Space Station. So today we'll be talking about how to install Visual Studio Code and connect to a Salesforce environment. So let me just share my screen. All right. So what are the topics that we'll be discussing today? So number one, it will be the prerequisites to installations. We would have the Visual Studio Code setup. And lastly, it's the commands for Visual Studio Code for connecting to the Salesforce environment. Now, I will go over the basics and we would have a quick demonstration after the PowerPoint presentation. So for the prerequisite installations, we would need to install the SFDX CLI. We would also need to install the Visual Studio Code app. And lastly, we would need to have JDK version 17 in our local machine. Now for the Visual Studio Code setup, we would need to have Salesforce extension pack on the extensions of the Visual Studio Code. Also, we would need to set up the JDK on the Visual Studio Code by going over the File, Preferences, and Settings, and enter the file directory of the installed JDK. Now, once you have all those set up, you can now create a project. So to remember, you would have to press the Ctrl-Shift-P button and type in Create Project with Manifest and choose Standard and enter the project name. So this is for creating a project. And then after the project name or the project folder is created, then we would need to authorize to a Salesforce environment. So in this case, we would have to press the same button, Ctrl-Shift-P, and type SFDX authorize and work. Choose a sandbox or production, depending on the Salesforce environment that we are connecting to, and put in your credentials. So now for a quick demonstration. Just give me a moment. All right. So for the Salesforce CLI, just have to install this one. For the Visual Studio Code and the JDK, as per Salesforce recommendation, it's recommended to install the version 17, but I believe other versions will work as well. So now we are at the Visual Studio Code, and for you to create project with Manifest, you have to press Ctrl-Shift-P and then type in Create Project with Manifest, do Standard, and enter the project name. That's the test demonstration. Right. Okay. Adjust the authors. Now wait for it to load the extensions. It'll then show up in the upper left-hand corner. I would say no default org set. Once that's shown, you can then press Ctrl-Shift-P again, and then type authorize an org. In our case, we will be using a production instance. It's a developer org, so we would use production, but it really depends upon what's the environment that you're using or that you're connecting to Salesforce with VS Code. So in our case, we're using production. Let me type it in. Alias, and then I will be presented with the login screen. Let me log in. And once you've entered the credentials, it would say authentication successful. So let's go back to the Visual Studio Code, and you would see now that it's connected to the environment. You would also have the option to click Open Org. So that would signify that the Visual Studio Code is now connected with Salesforce. There you go. So those are the some of the basic steps that you can do when you're trying to connect to the Salesforce environment via the Visual Studio Code. I hope you like this video, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.
Salesforce Space Station.